X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Balaam. This is your weekly X-Men podcast, where we reviewing every story, and we do that from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I am Zach, for I am many.
Are you Legion?
I am Legion. That's the bit. That's the bit we're doing here this week. We're doing a Legion one, guys. Y'all know Legion. David Haller.
Yeah. I combed my hair up real high this week. See how high I could get it. You know.
See, I just got a haircut, so I don't.
Looking good. Good.
Oh yeah, look at this. Look at how sharp these lines are. Crisp. David Haller wishes he had my kind of hair, though I do wish I had his volume. That's fantastic work that he's doing there.
You know, I was thinking about. I did a quick sketch of Legion last night, and I was thinking about
it's a good sketch. Adam, you did 2 quick sketches last night, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Adam can draw really good.
Well, thank you. I hadn't drawn in a while, so that felt good. But I was thinking about how, because Bill Sienkiewicz was the first guy to take a crack at Legion, that he's been stuck with the bad haircut for that entire time. Like, if a different artist had taken on Legion to start with, would he still have the crazy high top? Or would someone else have done something less visually weird, like the eraser top? You know what I mean?
Because that's the thing. Bill Sienkiewicz really only defines 3 characters in his timeline. Like, if you're talking about, this is what these characters look like now and forever. And the 3 characters he introduces. It's Warlock. Mm-hmm. And every time Warlock doesn't look like Bill Sienkiewicz's Warlock, it does feel wrong. Just because, and not even in rendering, but in the spirit of Bill Sienkiewicz's Warlock, where it's he's a sketchy boy.
Yeah.
Like he
can't be too refined.
He interacts with reality differently than the rest of us.
Sure.
I say the rest of us like he's a real person. Doesn't matter. The Demon Bear, which is, so tightly based on surrealism and so tightly it's an impressionistic thing. So other writers try and pull from that when possible. And then it's Legion, who's just a dude, and he has Bill Sienkiewicz hair, but you don't see people drawing Bill Sienkiewicz eyebrows on Charles Xavier all the time.
Right.
Bill Sienkiewicz was exaggerating because that's what he does.
Yeah, but everybody since has just been like, this hair is so high.
Legion is so interesting to me. One, because he's an interesting vehicle for storytelling. Mm-hmm. 2, because there is a through line between Legion and this podcast starting.
Yeah,
which I think is neat.
Did you see? I don't know if you have actually seen this trailer yet, but they are making another sequel to Predator, called Prey. And it is Predator.
That's a good joke. 20th Century Fox team.
So the Predator is back in pre-colonial, start of colonial America, and he's attacking a Native American tribe. So almost the entire cast is Native American, and the star is the Legion connection is Amber Midthunder, who plays
Amber Midthunder rules.
Yeah,
I was thinking the other day. Man, why hasn't Amber Midthunder been getting more work? And maybe she has, and I just haven't watched it.
Yeah. The only disappointing thing about this news is that it's going straight to Hulu. It is not going to theaters, because when you see this trailer, you're going to be so hyped. But
anyway. Adam, that's a boon for me, a guy who doesn't really want to go to movie theaters anymore for the rest of my life.
That's fair.
I'm good at this point.
Oh my God. I was listening to an interview with David Cronenberg on the Big Picture podcast, and they always ask about streaming media, and David Cronenberg's like, I don't like to go outside. This is great. I never have to go listen to people eat or talk or check their phones. It's just me and the movie.
If there's anyone who I could have told you was not an outside kid. It was David Cronenberg.
Yes. Well, we all know Legion
See-
is not an outside kid either. So who requested
He's
this
not.
particular episode?
This was requested by I Read Comic Books.
Oh, what a great name.
Listen, I'm going to be very honest. There may be more context to I Read Comic Books, but I wrote this list a while ago, and I do not have that context handy. So thank you, I Read Comic Books. If you read comic books, then legally, you are obligated to support our Patreon at ComicsXF on Patreon. That's not how Patreon works, but you figure it out. Y'all know search bars. If you're listening to podcasts, I've got to imagine you do have a rudimentary understanding of the search bar.
Makes sense.
Go to Patreon, type in ComicsXF, or just type in patreon.com/ComicsXF. You'll get there. Support us at the $5 level. You get, I don't think we've mentioned, you get early episodes. Mm-hmm. You do. You get them whenever they're edited. We throw them up, and you can just listen to them a little bit early. Here are our thoughts before anybody else. You also get a episode based around one of your ideas, and we'll make a whole list, just like we did with I Read Comic Books, who did suggest some stuff from X-Men Legacy, which is where we are going to start.
Yeah, I'm excited about this because it's been a while since I revisited X-Men Legacy, and I have admittedly not been the biggest fan of Way of X.
I think Way of X is bad, and I think Legion of X is trying to do too much with too small of a space without giving a strong emotional core to the book. It wants us to like Nightcrawler because we already like Nightcrawler. However, it is withholding the stuff we like about Nightcrawler. We said it in the last episode. Doing stories about Nightcrawler and religion is actually a trick, and you shouldn't do it. It's a trap. Everyone falls into it.
So it was a delight to come back to this run, one that I had not visited in a while. And which two issues are we talking about here? This is 13 and 14?
Yes, it is the arc called Hope and Glory. It's written by Cy Spurrier, penciled by Takenouchi. It is a story about, it's a story about Britain and the UK. Now, we have to pin this in time. This is 2013. This is a pre-Brexit Britain.
Yep.
But you can see what Spurrier, like, with the gift of hindsight, even though I am not an Anglophobe. No, I am an Anglophobe. I am terrified of British people. I'm not an Anglophile. You can kind of see Spurrier saw where the culture was going, and he didn't like it. And this is him trying to push back against it in his work. And I think that's admirable. I do think, again, hindsight's 50-50. How could he have known that everyone hates Britain more than the standard unit of hate for Britain was in 2013?
Well, the conduit for this is everybody's not favorite Hot Claws man, Pete Wisdom.
That is a lie. It is Dan Grote and Liz Large's favorite Hot Claw man.
That is true. But I will say, if anybody is going to write Pete Wisdom, I think Cy Spurrier probably has a pretty good handle on this character's voice, wouldn't you say?
Because Cy Spurrier is at his best when he writes an insufferable character. Like, even David Haller is insufferable. He really, he is fun to read about, and I think as, someone who, has had to come to terms with some, mental health stuff around anxiety and depression, I think it's nice that there is a character that has a really good arc around that and how they can control and manage themselves and, have ownership of their own bodily autonomy. I think that's a great arc.
Yeah, this is going to come up.
I don't want to be David Haller's friend, though. He does seem like the worst person to be friends with.
Yeah.
I don't want to hang with him.
I think the other thing that this gets really well is, and this will come back, at another time in this episode, but is that the way in which Legion is written here is really interesting and smart. And we've talked about, I think, this series before on the show, but the concept of using what originally was Zeb Wells', I think, concept of picturing the inside of Legacy's mind as a prison, and then turning that around into something that's really, really interesting. Not only that there's all these different, personalities and characters inside of his head, but the also is the outside perspective, which is Legion gonna do something really horrible right now? Like, we should probably suspect him to be this awful, crazy villain and do something awful. But then he has the ability to surprise us and do something good, which is exactly what happens in this story.
Yeah, I think it's interesting coming in post this story, because David Haller's not a protagonist ever before what Mike Carey starts with him in his run of Legacy, and what Spurrier really does here. He's a villain. Like, he is, or not villain. He is an antagonist in all of his original appearances. That's just what he is.
Yeah.
So having that, and said maybe the person that we are going to lump all of these bad 80s understanding of mental illness on be the bad guy, maybe that's not the best way to handle it. And to their credit, Sienkiewicz and Claremont don't blame David as the the core personality David for being bad.
Right. Right.
But he, in practice, he's still used as the bad guy.
Yes. And that can be used by a writer in interesting ways, and I think this is. The plot here has to do with Britain's government sort of allying with a made-up Middle Eastern
fake Saudi
nation,
Arabia.
right?
Fake Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
It's fake Saudi Arabia.
And they're starting to form their own superhero team, and really, is this just an alliance for oil sales? Probably.
Yes, explicitly.
It does appear that Legion has kind of put together his own British hit squad here to mess all of this up. At least that's sort of what Pete Wisdom thinks is going on. And props to Cy Spurrier. I had forgotten that Alchemy was in this.
Yeah, you get Alchemy, Lila Cheney, not really Blindfold. She's not part of that team. She's just in the story. You get Alchemy, Lila Cheney, Pixie, Psylocke, Chamber, and Liam Cunnington. Adam, do you know where he is from?
I meant to look that up because I was like, Liam's got to be from something, right? Is he an MI13 character or?
No, it's Muties. Do you remember Muties?
Oh, that's a nice deep cut. I like that.
It's from the IRA issue of Muties.
That's great.
What a wild pull on that one.
Do we mention Chamber is here as well?
Yeah, we mentioned Chamber.
Okay.
He's got an Explodo face.
Yes, Explodo face.
So Pete Wisdom thinks that Legion is going to do a bad, and essentially he's going to, well, I say a bad in the British government in Pete Wisdom's eyes, and I'm going to do a superhero thing and fight the Saudi Arabian government, fake Saudi Arabian government.
Yeah, the premise that Pete Wisdom is going on is that he thinks that Legion wants to do something so terrible that no one will ever trust mutants again. Right? He's got the premise wrong.
I want to be clear. Legion does a terrible job using his words to explain what he's doing first. He tricks Pete Wisdom into executing part of his plan. I do think somewhere down the line they could have talked first, because he gets Pete Wisdom so riled up that Pete Wisdom does try and kill him.
Yes.
A lot.
Yeah. But we learn that really where Pete Wisdom is, at least for most of the first issue, is in a hallucination that Legion is creating for him. And it turns out that at the end, this is actually a plot between all of those characters we just talked about to do good things and to actually stop an assassination attempt on the leader of this other country, and to make people look at mutants in a positive light. And it's a nice twist, you think that something horrible is going to happen, and you realize, no, this group of weirdos is going to do something that's for the greater good.
It very much is the idea of how can mutants do a good thing with their powers that is not just fighting supervillains. And that's a very interesting story beat. It is unfortunately marred by looking back 9 years in the future and saying, hey, just because good people do something good on TV doesn't mean that racism goes away.
Yeah, that's
Like it has an oddly optimistic streak that I cannot imagine would be published today just because people would. No, I take that back. Tom Taylor gets published constantly, but that's the vibe. I'm sorry if there's Tom Taylor fans out there. Just know that he's easy to make fun of. That's just the vibe you get from it. It is optimistic in a way that I believe has fundamentally broken inside of me, and I can no longer take seriously.
Yeah, I mean, this story is from long enough ago that the beat at the end of it, where all of these characters are televised doing good things, and it seems like maybe they're making a difference. We've had a rough time of it since this story came out, and by we I mean the world. Obviously,
the world. Britain has got. America's done bad. Britain has just tried to go punch for punch with us.
Yeah, they're really hold my lager. So, as a pair of issues and as exemplars of this this storytelling by Spurrier and using this character, I think it's great. I really enjoy it. I like this book in general and the way that he plays with the character. I think it's original and smart. And I like the cast of characters that are here as well. Is it like the most memorable thing in the world? No, but I like the artwork. I like the writing, and maybe we should take a stab at ranking it.
We should take a stab at ranking this because that's what we do on this podcast. We rank comic books, folks. We rank them from best to worst, with the best X-Men story of all time being The House of X, The Powers of 10, the 100th best X-Men story of all time being Uncanny X-Men 314 Early Frost. Number 200 on our list is New Mutants Annual number 1, Steal This Planet. Number 300 on our list is Germ-Free Generation from New X-Men. Number 400 on our list is Excalibur Girls' School from Heck. Number 500 on our list is X-Men Second Coming Revelation Hellbound. That's a 3: title right there. Very good. Number 600 on our list is Phoenix End Song. That's just a 1: And you know what? 648 on our road to 700. It's the Draco, baby.
Yes. Now we have one of the legacy arcs that comes after this for We Are Many, which is 19 to 24. That's at 51. And X-Men...
That's the ending. Yep.
Yeah.
And then 59.
X-Men Legacy 300 is at 59. I don't think this is as nearly as good as either of those.
This is not as good as X-Men Legacy when it's at its peak.
No.
This is not the best part of Spurrier's run on here.
No.
Down at 77, we have Mike Carey's X-Men Legacy, the first arc of that from Genesis to Revelations, and I don't think this is as good as that.
No.
I don't think this is as good as Carey's Necrosha arc at 189. I do think this is better than the aftermath of Age of X-Men at 340. So I think we're around there. Like, this probably breaks. I say it probably breaks 300. I'm now looking at 300 and thinking, yeah, it's about right. Like, right around that spot.
Yeah, so at 300 right now, we have, you mentioned this before, the Germ-Free Generation. I might go a little bit lower than that.
No, I think 300 is my ceiling.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But like,
I do think we're in the 300s.
310 is X-Men Black Mojo number 1, which is a story I do like because it's Glob Herman making friends with Mojo.
Yes.
But I do think that this is probably better than that. But like, I think it's comparable to All New X Factor 3 and 4, The Stolen Island, or Uncanny X-Men Lovelorn from the Fraction San Francisco era.
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot there.
This is actually, I just looked. This is not better than X-Force Volume 6, 17 through 19, which is that Ben Percy stuff.
Yeah, yep, I would agree.
With Quentin Quire. I think the Quentin Quire stuff works better, even if the art the art overall on Legacy I like better because I think Tongan Hut is like, if someone told me they hated his art, I'd shrug and say, okay, I get it.
It works perfectly for this story, though.
It does. But he's not a pretty artist.
No, but
like,
that's why
he's not a Terry Dodson.
Yeah, he's not selling beauties. So I would put this in between 308 and 309. That's the first appearance of Karma in Marvel Team Up 100, and they keep killing Madrox at 309.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
That seem good?
Yeah, I'm not going to jockey for position on this one.
No, I'm
going to have to save that jockeying for a second.
We do have other writers and artists that have taken on this character in different directions. So what is next on our show today?
Next is a book from 2018, a book I was very excited about when it was coming out, when it was about to come out, and deeply disappointed moments after. It just took for me to read it a little bit. It is Peter Milligan and Wilfredo Torres's Legion, Volume 1, Trauma. It's the only volume. It's a 5-issue miniseries from... Do you remember Marvel Legacy, Adam?
Yep.
When they decided to put a second set of number on everything, because that's what comic fans really needed, was a second set of numbers.
People love those big numbers, you know.
folks,
Especially if they're right or they're wrong. Sometimes they're not correct.
Here's the thing: if you're somebody who is that obsessive about categorizing your comic books and you want to make sure they're in order, you already know how to figure out the order. It's by date already. So don't give me that. Like, don't say, well, I don't know which one came first. Yes, you did, because if you have that many, you can look at the cover and be like, well, yes, this is the Bendis arc of Uncanny, and that is after the Kieran Gillen stuff, so this one will go by. You know that. Now I get it. Captain Marvel, you're screwed. They messed that up, and all those runs are, like, blended together in my mind, too. It's very unfortunate. We all understand it. But, guys... come on, level with me here.
One thing that this book makes no attempt to do, even though it's got that legacy banner, is pay any attention whatsoever to the amazing work that Spurrier did on X-Men Legacy. This basically treats Legion like he's fresh out the can, and this is really terrible.
It's not great. It's also not a Legion story. Like, he's not the central character, which I think is a bold and also bad choice that Peter Milligan does.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reflections that I had just looking back on this, I read it a couple days ago. I had never touched this before, and just looking through it again.
Oh, buddy, I bought every issue as it came out.
I'm so sorry.
But Resurrection really did a number on me.
But he's treating this world that he's designing here like it's an extension of X-Statix, right? I mean, even down to choosing an artist who has sort of a pop sensibility like Mike Allred. This has this sort of like kind of happy-go-lucky style to it that really bears no resemblance to what we know this character to be. It's flippant, very flippant about Legion's struggles with mental health. And the entire arc revolves around a new personality called Lord Trauma. And basically the protagonist is this celebrity therapist.
So here's the thing about celebrity therapists. Do they exist?
Sure.
Is that a real thing that people do?
Yes, absolutely.
Name one. Adam, right now, name one.
Oh,
name one for me.
You mean the therapist themselves is a celebrity and goes on TV and does it? See, now this is where it feels like X-Statix, right? That somebody has to have.
It's a very X-Statix idea.
100%. And Milligan is not thinking about placing this character in a more grounded real world. And that's to its detriment.
Because, the psychiatrist, Dr. Hannah Jones, she's the protagonist. I remember when this was coming out, I got really mad about this, and I counted how many pages Legion was on versus how many pages Dr. Hannah Jones was on, and Legion is on less than 40% of the pages in the book where his name's on the cover. When there's a big Legion TV show coming out that no one really watched. To be fair. It's good. People should watch Legion.
And that would be fine.
Dr. Hannah Jones appears a lot more than 40%.
Yeah, and that might be fine if even that part of the story was interesting. But it's not.
It's not interesting. That's the thing. Here's what she's doing. She's going into Legion's mind to fix him. We've seen this a million times. She's going to help him confront his trauma. Milligan is literalizing everything to a point that it's annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And compared to the nuanced work that Spurrier did, kind of feels like a little insulting to the reader. Like,
yeah,
Spurrier darn near fixed a character, or not. I don't know if fixed, because some of the core issues are still there, but he treated mental illness with respect, and I feel like Milligan is treating it as a playground in this, and I don't love that. Like,
no.
I think that is a misreading of the tone that this should take, and also the tone of a book that people who will buy a book that says Legion on it will be wanting. Like,
and we were talking off air about this. I do think that aside from the writing, which is just uninspired and tonally wrong, I think that the artwork is also not exciting either. You know, you have, like you mentioned, the inside of his brain is supposed to be this sort of playground. You know, and you're right. Milligan is literalizing things. They go to a beach. It's called Nightmare Beach, and the waves have like monster-looking things inside of it. But there's a flatness to it. You know, it looks cool, but it doesn't feel threatening. It doesn't feel really interesting beyond like, oh, that's a nice design. And I can clearly tell that the artist is talented. You know, I just think that the story is not served by the artwork at all.
Wilfredo Torres is not the right artist for this book by far. Hey, Adam, do you know what book he has most recently been working on?
No, I don't.
It's Superman 78.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, look at that. Oh, yeah. What a good fit.
Yeah. Because it's got that quality to the artwork, and when you pick up a book that has Legion in it, and is the title character, you're expecting something more raw. You know, you're expecting something a little messier, and this just looks way too clean.
Even I think like a Mike Allred would be a good fit for this book, because Mike Allred is willing to get more like psychedelic and trippy, where that's just not what Torres is doing, and that's fine. I really like his work on like books like he did some stuff in the Moon Knight run by Jeff Lemire that's really, really good.
Cool.
And in that, it's very specifically the movie producer rich man Stephen Grant's fabulous, like, hyper realistic, realer than real life. Like, that works.
Yeah.
This doesn't.
No.
This does have incredibly good covers by Javier Rodriguez. Like, great. Turns out Javier Rodriguez is pretty good.
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't really have much to do with what's in the books, which is fine.
The covers don't do that. That's not what covers are for.
Yeah, but like by the time we get to the 5th issue and Tammy is battling like a scarred baby doll of her childhood, and
you mean the part where the book completely flips and it says, actually, this isn't a book about Legion confronting his trauma. It is a book about protagonist Dr. Hannah Jones confronting her trauma. And her trauma was, okay, frankly, her trauma doesn't seem as traumatic as I think he wants it to be. Like, I don't think Milligan's the right person to be dealing with some of those stuff about beauty standards and all that kind of comes out of nowhere in the rest of the book. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I don't understand so much about this book.
It's just a bizarre take, whereas Spurrier had Legion and Blindfold, he invents a new like twin of Legion / personality called Tammy, who just appears out of nowhere, and I doubt we will ever see that again.
We have not seen it since.
Yeah. So I don't know that there's much else to say. I do not recommend this. It's just non-essential,
It's just like, it's a footnote. It's one of those books where you're going to be looking back like, man, they really 4 or 5 years ago put out a Legion book. It's just weird.
Yeah.
Like, it's just they put out this weird Legion book. Like, here's the thing. Here's what's so telling about this. This book was released in January of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
By like November, when Legion appeared in X-Men Disassembled, they did not address this. They said, look, this book already ripped off the Band-Aid of Legion being back from unwriting himself from reality. We're not going to address this book, and we're not going to talk about how he's back. It's fine. Like,
he's just back.
Roll with it.
Right.
Soon, we will have fixed the they're just back problem really quickly.
Right. And it doesn't really matter. Now we have down at 490 Zeb Wells' New Mutants Volume 3 Return of Legion. I think
this is worse than that.
I think this is definitely worse than that. So I think we're headed into the 500s at the very
Man, that Return of Legion does seem oddly low on this list. Like,
yeah, but
maybe it deserves to be there. And I know it's not like a perfect arc, but it does seem like maybe were we just mad that day?
No. It's before Zeb really gets firing on the book.
I know.
Yeah. We still like that book, but
more or less.
that arc he's still on the on-ramp there.
This is not as good as Wildcats X-Men at 518.
No, it is not. I would even say Poptopia at 538.
Poptopia is better.
It is better than
Poptopia
this.
is trying to say something. It's failing.
Yes.
Poptopia is not doing a good job of
Right.
saying something, but darn it, it's trying. How do you feel about this compared to the first X-23 miniseries?
I think that's better.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wolverine Origin, like the Origins miniseries for Wolverine is better. 583.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, we're working our way down here.
How do you feel about this compared to Magneto Rex?
See, this is where we start getting into things that are like truly awful.
Because that's at 599, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about this book is it's also just kind of harmless. Like it's like you ate a small puff of cotton candy that didn't taste like anything. Like it's really meaningless. So once we start getting into like, oof, this is truly terrible. Like in the 600s, I don't know if we're that bad. But
So
this is not as good. This is like probably on par with X-Men Liberators at 597.
Can I tell you why I think X-Men Liberators is better?
Yeah, I mean it had the X-Men in it, and they kind of
there we go.
like
There we go.
go.
Yeah, the X-Men are doing X-Men things as X-Men in X-Men Liberators.
Yeah.
Are they doing it well or interesting? No, it's a Ben Robb comic. But man, Ben Robb, what a
You're right there.
Here's the thing. Ben Robb has never written a comic that's made me like angry.
Uh-huh.
I nothing Ben Robb.
Okay.
I bet he'd be a fun guy to talk to. Like, I bet he's got stories.
Sure.
I'd buy Ben, if you're listening and you're going to be at C2E2 this fall, I will buy you at least 1, if not 3 beers.
Wow.
If you sit around and talk to me about what it was like at such a wild time to be writing X-Men / working for Marvel, I am fascinated. I did hear somebody once call Ben Robb an X-Men legend. I was like, okay, guys.
Slow down.
We're being a little liberal with our usage here. I don't think Ben would like even be offended by me saying that. Ben Robb, this man I've never met.
There aren't that many X-Men legends, let's be frank. The list...
Oddly enough, Frank Miller, kind of one of them with that Wolverine series, and that's all he did.
That's true. But I don't want to see him come back to X-Men anytime soon. Where is this going?
It's fine. Well, okay, right under that is Uncanny X-Men 442, 443 of Darkest Nights. That's the last arc of Chuck Austin's Uncanny X-Men, where we find out that where Laura goes a little crazy is like Laura goes a little crazy around most of Chuck Austin's arc. It's when she goes back to Genosha and finds out she's actually definitely Magneto's daughter, and there's a whole thing about it.
Oh,
I think that's better.
Yeah, all right. I would probably put this ahead of Phoenix War Song and End Song, though. Would you? Just because those are pretty terrible.
Here's why I'm going to put Magneto Rex ahead of it.
Yeah.
It's because Magneto Rex has Zealot, who was a character in X-Men Legends 2 Rise of Apocalypse. And that's all I care about Zealot. So
I like this logic. All right, so Milligan's Legion is at 600.
Oh, is it real? Oh, yeah, guys.
Nice.
Sorry about that. Peter, your Ecstatics book right now is harmless. It's fine.
It really is. It's just picking up from where it left off, and if that's what you want, that's what it is.
Absolutely is a book that could have come out in 2005.
Sure could. I'm gonna spoil though. I don't think this is gonna stay at 600 because the last story that we are going to talk about is definitely better than the Milligan Legion.
It is. We are talking about Mike Carey's crossover Age of X.
Yeah.
This encompasses, for our purposes, Age of X Alpha, X-Men Legacy 245 through 247. Seven. Yeah. And then New Mutants 22 to 24.
Yep.
Carey does all of the writing. Steve Kurth does Kurth does the New Mutants issues. Claybon does the Legacy issues, and then X-Men Age of X Alpha has a handful of artists, including Gabriel Hernandez-Walk, Paul Davidson, Paco Diaz, Carlos Barberi, and Micro Italian name. No, it's like an Italian name with like 8 different sounds in it, and I'm not even gonna try.
All right, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm
Pifferdici.
Okay, there we go. That's nice. I had never read this before.
Hadn't you?
No, and I remember when we did the aftermath, like I got a quick synopsis of what it was all about, but I'd never actually read it, and I enjoyed this quite a bit. I like. Why don't we start with what's going on that I like, and then I know you have a more critical take on this, but
fair enough.
First of all, we should admit that Mike Carey is very good at doing action stuff. Propulsive battle stuff is right up Mike Carey's alley. I think he does a very good job of it, and the core of this story is our characters being stuck in this bubble that they are constantly being attacked. So we get some really cool stuff like Cannonball leading the charge into battle and leading the X-Men. We have Cyclops turned into the Basilisk, who is, sort of a more hyper violent version who's been worked.
He's Cyclops, but his eyelids got cut off.
Yes.
So now he has to wear a mask that he has a little switch that controls, which is very funny because he's always carried around this little switch. But less funny is that he was used to execute prisoners against his will.
Yeah, that part's not great.
And he had to stare them in the eyes. He's also hooking up with Joanna Cargill, which good for them.
Right?
Good for them.
So it's funny. I actually wrote a little piece about this because coming up on Comics XF, one of our amazing, talented contributors, Anna Peppard, is doing a series called The Best X-Men Stories, and a bunch of us are taking our stabs at it. And I had been spinning my wheels and needed to kind of do a warm-up piece before I did my real one. And I wrote about Age of X, not because I thought it was the best X-Men story ever, because it's not. But because I think it's really interesting and doing some things that are, especially just the premise behind Legion, and I know this is a Legion-focused episode, are kind of interesting.
Yeah, so the high concept of Age of X is this is the last mutant city, the last mutant resistance. Magneto is leading it. Everyone is trying to break out, but really just survive. Like they're in a bubble, but they don't realize they're in a bubble.
No,
because they are just constantly fighting and maintaining a position, a stronghold, a utopia against a world that hates and fears them and is attacking them on all fronts. It's very much a literalization of what was happening in the or like a not literalization, but a what's the word you use when something is like bigger and more extreme?
Hyperbole?
Kind of.
It's made extreme.
It's pushing the status quo of the X-Men to the biggest conclusion it could be. Like this is the event version of that.
Yes. Well, we learn, and we can get into sort of how we get to this point, but we learn that what spurred this to happen, this is where I think the story is actually really interesting, is that Dr. Nemesis thought he could cure Legion. And he did it by going into his mind and starting to scientifically remove and delete some of the other personalities that were in his head. Now, Professor X warned him against this, and yet Nemesis continued to do it. So Legion
That's my boy.
Legion is backed into a corner and uses his powers to create this universe, which Age of X... when you mentioned Secret Wars the other day, I forget which episode we were on, but Age of X is essentially Legion's Secret Wars. He creates a bubble, and he has the X-Men in it like his action figures, and he just bashes them together because he has this immature perspective about what the world around him looks like and what utopia is all about and what his dad is all about. And so this entire story is actually told through the lens of what Legion's sort of restrained perspective is on what's happening in utopia, which if you look at it through that lens, it kind of shifts how Mike Carey is telling the story. Because I think if you just take it on its own in comparison to something like Age of Apocalypse, it definitely doesn't rise to that occasion. But if you start to think about it through the lens of what Legion is doing as a storyteller, like he appears as himself in this universe, but he is
the big hero.
He is a super sexy superhero who leads the Force Warriors that maintain the force field around this thing. You know, that I think is kind of fascinating.
I think the core concept behind this, I get it. I think that the entire world coming from that idea of, Legion made it. Like, once you learn what has happened, that makes sense. Like, all of the decisions, like, oh yeah, this is his view of all these people. This is a world based on his hyper reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That said, this is a story that was originally planned just to be an arc of X-Men Legacy, a bit smaller. And I do think that by expanding this story into needing to be a big event, because Wells had just left New Mutants, so they were kind of scrambling to fill, what do we do with this? And they had a few months before, they were trying to get DNA, who eventually took it on.
Mm-hmm.
But they had a couple month gap that they couldn't fill. They put this in there. They added a couple of side stories and all this stuff to it. That works less well. Like that's where I think this event starts to fall apart, is because it becomes very big and cumbersome, and there is not enough story to go around. Because you say, this is around Legion, and I don't disagree. However, this is X-Men Legacy, which was Rogue's book, and Rogue is still like pushed into being a protagonist in this for like the first third to half of it, and then she kind of falls off for the entire resolution. In this, she becomes Legacy, where she goes, and if someone is going to die, she takes she touches them, takes on their memories within her, and they live on through her, in a kind of hypothetical sense. And that's neat. I think that's a good idea that is not explored enough, like in the space that they are given.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to move around to different characters, different perspectives, and I think the book falls apart a bit on that front. Like there's things that I could see is filler or there because they needed it to be an event. Like Wolverine is in this in a couple of scenes, and he's there because how are you going to have an X-Men event without Wolverine being there?
Yeah, but honestly, I think that's one of the coolest things about Age of X is that Wolverine is not part of, like, he is, let's put it this way, he's not a star. We learn in Alpha that Wolverine gets taken off the map because he goes to Dr. Rao and basically uses every last drop of the mutant cure, and he basically like dissolves it through his own healing factor until he has no mutant power anymore. So he's taken completely off the board until the very end of the story, when you do get a brief burst of him and Cyclops reuniting and getting into superhero hijinks. I think there's something clever about that. I agree with you that this would probably be better served like at least 2 issues shorter. You know, it does not have the worldly scope that Age of Apocalypse does, for instance, or even Age of X-Men, that comes after it. Because I just briefly went through the Age of X universe, which is like the Avengers stories and Spider-Man stories.
Yeah, it's the rest of the world, which I want to be clear
doesn't exist.
I don't love the Age of X universe stuff, and relevant to what we're ranking here, the Alpha things, because I feel like it goes against the ethos of the story of this all, like, you get dropped into this. Because the previous issues of Legacy, like, showed part of this is Dr. Nemesis trying to cure Legion. Like, that was a side, like a B plot or C plot going through those issues. But you get thrown into this world in media res, which is intentional and is a specific story choice that Carrie is making to emphasize the connection with Legion, and that gets dismantled when you have, but also these characters, here's their complex backstory. No, just let them jump in and have that backstory. We don't need to see it because it doesn't exist, so it takes away from the center of the world that they're building. I get it, you're trying to flesh it out, show cool things, and it's not to say that there's not interesting, like, how these characters got there. I get it, that's an interesting story to tell, but I do think it undercuts the story as a whole.
I think what works about the Alpha issue, first of all, the Walta Basilisk prison escape, when we discover that he is executing prisoners with the warden who is Arcade, and then he escapes, damn, Walta just kills it, right?
Who would have thought that Gabriel Hernandez Walta
could draw a good prison break?
Who knew that Gabriel Hernandez Walta was good at comics?
Third time we've talked about a Walta prison break on here. So I agree, like, that could probably get weaved into the story a little bit better. What I like about it is that at least the premise there, and this totally breaks down when you start talking about Age of X universe or whatever, is that daily they're in the loop of sitting around the fireplace and telling each other these stories.
Yes.
However, that never comes back as a framing mechanism. So it's there in Alpha, but then we don't see it again. So I agree, it loses some of its impact. You know, because the cool thing is that they think that this is like they've been at Fortress X for 1,000 days, and they realize at the end they've only been there for a week. Like, there's something cool about that and interesting, but what the story spends most of its time doing is sending, like, the New Mutants issues especially have the alternate universe versions of New Mutants, like, hunting down characters like Rogue and Gambit. That's not as interesting, you know?
It's
spinning
really
its wheels.
not. There are some interesting ideas. I think one of the most interesting ideas in here is that, you know, the Legion's alternate personality that is actually driving this is a personality that has taken the shape of Moira.
Yeah.
That she goes by the name X in this, which is very choice. It is very, very juicy, given what we know now about Moirabot 2000 or whatever she is.
The sort of psychological idea that, you know, originally, well, when you're reading the story for the first time and you don't know what's going on, you think that Moira might be sort of the mastermind behind this, right? And then you realize that no, Moira is the visualization of the self-defense mechanism. But it's also cool to look at this story in retrospect and see things like, this Utopia version of Utopia with Moira in this villain position. We've got a 5
as a secret person in the middle. Like,
it's cool. It's cool to kind of just recontextualize the story with our current perspective. I think that's neat.
Yeah, I don't think that's a matter of someone pulling something specific. Like, I know Hickman likes Mike Carey's work. I'm sure he's read this. Mm-hmm. I don't think he was saying, okay, well, we got to make Age of X happen. I think it's more showing that era and House of X Powers of 10 was synthesizing a lot of different ideas from X-Men in general. Like, if there, what's the number of magic mutants? Well, it doesn't matter, but 5 is a good number because, one, that's a good team size. That's the size of the original X-Men. It becomes a recurring motif out of, the mechanism of 5 being a good team size.
Yeah.
And then is now turned into a whole thing of now the best team is the 5. I think that works really well. The Moira stuff obviously has some parallels, but is also telling that Hickman wasn't the first person to be like, but what if Moira was the bad guy? Or at least, what if Moira was manipulating people and all that? So, no, I think there's a lot to like about this. I struggle with loving Age of X.
I think that's fair because you're getting... Like I said, I when you've read the entire story and you realize that it's Legion bashing the action figures together to a certain extent, I go back and I look and I'm like, man, these are some really cool, I like Clayman's art through the X-Men Legacy issues. I really like a lot of the character redesigns that are in here. There's some very strong ones, and unlike other alternate universes that we've had, you don't get a lot of time with the characters. So it's, despite it being the length that it is, because this was laid out over a couple of months, you unfortunately don't get the depth that you would elsewhere. So I think it's fun. I enjoyed reading it quite a bit. I think there's a lot of cool stuff here, but I agree it's probably not, the pinnacle of alternate universe stuff.
So what do you want to rank it?
Well, I highlighted 173, which is Avengers versus X-Men.
This is better than Avengers versus X-Men.
Okay. So...
We cannot, in good conscience... Avengers versus X-Men, I think we enjoy the ride of Avengers versus X-Men. Though we can say it is... Let's generously say flawed.
All right. Then up at 149, we have House of M.
Also flawed. Prettier, though. Man, House of M wins so many points for being pretty.
It is. I struggle with whether... House of M is definitely... It has more impact, right? Especially with its conclusion. So I think this is probably lower than House of M.
But I think this is the right spot, because right above House of M is All New Wolverine 4 Sisters, and I think 4 Sisters is by and far better than this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I also think that House of M ultimately is better than Age of X as well. So I am looking around. I also think Fall of the Mutants is probably better than Age of X.
Okay, good, because I was going to say that Gambit and the Externals at 152 was definitely better than Age of X. So you're at 157, Fall of the Mutants. I think that's fair. Ooh, I think I know.
Yeah.
I think I know.
Okay.
But the new 159 between the Warpath issue of Uncanny X-Men 193 and the Leprechauns of Cassidy Keep at 101 to 103.
I think that's a great place for it, This is something that is definitely worth your time in reading, and it's flawed, but I think it's really cool.
Yeah, guys, the top 200 of this list is all good stories.
Yeah.
They're stories that more or less I'd say, yeah, read that. You'll enjoy it. Heck, even I think the top 300 is mostly good, but I do think once you get into that point, you start to be like, there actually no. Probably most of this list is good if you like X-Men. There's only a handful that if you don't like X-Men, you're not going to like this list. By the time you get to 400, there's absolutely, the 400 to 300, there's absolutely some flops in there.
Sure, but there's some gold down in those.
There's some fun in there. And do you know why we know about all this, Adam?
Thanks to patrons like I Read Comics.
Oh, you read comics? Because I read comic books.
Sometimes, yeah. definitely.
Oh man, I didn't know that you read comic books and I read comic books and I read comic books supported this episode. So thank you, I read comic books. Very excited about what you have brought to the table today. And that was talking about our favorite tall-haired boy. If you want to be like them, I go rewind to the top of the show where I already did the spiel, but Patreon. It's a great place. I was talking to Adam. I'm going to try this. I am going to try and find the first interview I ever did was with Mike Carey, and we talked about Age of X somewhat in there. I need to warn you all. The interview will not be good, and it will be very embarrassing for me. But it's somewhere, and I'm going to find it, and I'm going to put that up as bonus content for our patrons if I can find that interview, if it hasn't been lost in the ether, which would be sad, but also I would believe could happen.
You're a brave man, Zach.
I'm going to... Listen, I am now, like... I'm fascinated by this. I have to have that audio somewhere. I'm going to slap that stuff up there. It's going to be hard for me to listen to.
But hopefully it'll be enjoyable for listeners.
I assume the audio quality is absolute garbage too, folks. So
be prepared.
Be prepared for all of that. Hey, Adam, what do you got going on?
Not much. I mentioned the best X-Men stories that's going to start coming out, I believe... sometime this month. Don't quote me on that, but got a really cool roster of CXF writers and contributors. I am going to be writing about my favorite X-Men story of all time, which everybody knows is the Asgardian Wars. And Zach, do you want to share what your pick is?
No, because I may back out. I have no idea.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
listen, if you guys wanted to know my opinions on X-Men, I promise you there's a podcast you should listen to.
Well, so
I got busy.
That
Anna
remains
knows.
to be seen. You guys can always follow me on Twitter at Arthur Stacy. And Zach, what's up next week?
Next week, X-Men Unlimited writer Alex Packnadle is going to be on the show to talk about Maggot. Baby, we did it. We brought him back. It took years. We forgot about that bit.
There was a hashtag and everything.
Real ones. Folks who have been listening to this podcast since day one know that I did that annoying thing for a while, and I regret it conceptually. Like, spiritually, I'm like, no, that annoys me when other people do it. I should not be harassing writers about bringing back a beloved X-Men character Maggot and giving him a deep story. But Alex Packnadle did it anyway, without even being coerced. So that's super duper. We're going to talk to him about Maggot. And then all the other stuff. If you guys have not read Alex Packnadle's work, you should. He's a good writer.
Sounds fun.
But until then, folks, this has been Bally Adam, and we hope you survived. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!